History has a strange habit. It remembers the conquerors, but forgets the builders. We grow up hearing about emperors and kings, yet behind many of them stood women who didn't just rule, they shaped empires. And then, as centuries passed, someone quietly erased their names. But if you listen closely, the ruins still whisper. In Egypt, a woman once wore the crown of a pharaoh and was later carved out of her own monuments. In China, an empress ruled the mightiest empire on earth, and historians called her the Dragon Lady. Across Africa, warrior queens fought empires that claimed they couldn't be defeated. These women weren't side characters. They were the architects of power. This video isn't just about forgotten rulers, it's about the silence that followed them. Because every erased name tells us something, that history isn't what happened, it's what someone chose to remember. So let's dig up the stories that refused to die, and meet the women who built empires, even after the world tried to make them ghosts. Imagine being so powerful that after you die, men spend decades trying to erase every trace that you ever existed. That's the story of Hatshepsut, the woman who ruled Egypt as pharaoh, not queen, and then became a ghost in her own kingdom. She wasn't supposed to rule. Egypt had always been led by men, kings, warriors, sons of gods. But when her husband died, the rightful heir was just a child. So Hatshepsut stepped in as regent. And then, she did something no woman before her had ever dared to do, she crowned herself pharaoh. She wore the royal beard, the crown, and called herself His Majesty. Not Queen. Pharaoh. Under her rule, Egypt didn't crumble, it thrived. Trade flourished, temples rose, and art reached new heights. She even sent an expedition to the mysterious land of Punt, bringing back gold, ivory, and incense trees. People called her reign an age of peace and prosperity. But after her death, her stepson, Thutmose III, took the throne, and began a campaign of erasure. Her statues were smashed, her name scratched off walls, her image chiseled from temple reliefs. It almost worked. For thousands of years, no one spoke her name. And then one day, archaeologists uncovered a temple wall deep in the desert, and there she was. The woman who refused to stay forgotten. As one Egyptologist put it, she wasn't erased because she failed, she was erased because she succeeded. In imperial China, power was reserved for men, scholars, generals, emperors. Women were meant to obey, to serve, to disappear behind silk screens. But one woman refused. Wu Zetian didn't just break the rules, she rewrote them. She began as a concubine in the Tang dynasty court, clever, observant, quietly waiting. When the emperor died, she should have been sent to a convent, forgotten. But Wu didn't vanish. She came back, not as a servant, but as the emperor's empress. From there, she played the game better than anyone. Court politics, betrayals, alliances, Wu mastered them all. And when the throne was empty, she didn't look for a man to fill it. She took it herself. The first, and only, woman to ever rule China in her own name. Historians called her ruthless, even monstrous. They said she killed rivals, manipulated monks, and used fear to rule. But here's the thing, male emperors did the exact same thing, and history called them strong. Under Wu Zetian, China expanded, culture flourished, and scholars from across Asia came to her court. She promoted women to positions of power and built a state exam system that valued talent over birth. But after her death, the Confucian historians, all men, buried her legacy under centuries of slander. They called her reign unnatural. And yet, her name still echoes. Because power that burns that bright never really fades. As one Chinese saying goes, though the phoenix was caged, she still flew across the sky. Before she wore a crown, Theodora wore costumes, not royal robes, but the stage silks of a performer in the streets of Constantinople. In her time, actresses weren't respected. They were mocked, whispered about, dismissed as the lowest of the low. But Theodora wasn't made to stay small. She was sharp, magnetic, and fearless, a woman who could turn a room of laughter into silence with just her voice. When she met Justinian, the man who would become emperor, it wasn't a typical love story. He was a rising political star. She was a woman society told him to forget. But he didn't. He changed the law itself so he could marry her, and together, they became one of history's most powerful duos. As Empress, Theodora refused to be decoration. She sat beside Justinian in council, debated laws, and pushed for protections for women, laws against forced prostitution, new rights for divorced women, and safe houses for those escaping abuse. And when the empire nearly fell during the Nika riots, Justinian was ready to flee. But Theodora, the former actress, stood her ground and said, "Those who have worn the crown should never survive its loss. Royalty is a fine burial shroud." Her courage saved the empire. She died young, but her story burned through centuries of silence. From the stage to the throne, Theodora proved that where you start doesn't define how far you can rise. If history had been fair, Queen Nzinga would be mentioned alongside names like Napoleon and Alexander. But she didn't conquer for glory, she fought to survive. In the early 1600s, the Portuguese invaded her homeland, Ndongo and Matamba, in what's now Angola, determined to enslave her people and claim the land. Nzinga was sent to negotiate peace. Picture this: a grand meeting hall, Portuguese governors on tall chairs, and no seat for her. So Nzinga ordered one of her servants to kneel, and sat on his back, eye to eye with the colonizers. That was her message: I bow to no one. When peace failed, she became more than a diplomat, she became a warrior. Nzinga led armies into battle, forged alliances with rival tribes, and outsmarted European generals who underestimated her. She dressed in men's armor, rode into combat, and was known to shout, "The one who fights for freedom never tires!" For nearly 40 years, she resisted colonization. 40 years. The Portuguese tried to paint her as a savage, a trickster, a devil in woman's form. But the people who followed her called her Ngola Nzinga, the protector. Even in old age, she led from the front, refusing to surrender her throne or her people. When she died in 1663, they said the entire kingdom mourned like it had lost its mother. Today, her name stands as a symbol of defiance, proof that freedom has always had a woman's face. By the end of the 19th century, most of Africa was being swallowed by European empires. But in what's now Ghana, one woman refused to kneel, Yaa Asantewaa, the queen mother of the Ashanti Empire. When British troops stormed her land and demanded the sacred golden stool, the symbol of Ashanti power and spirit, the chiefs hesitated. They were weary from years of war. And then Yaa Asantewaa stood up and said words that would echo for generations. "If you, the men of Ashanti, will not go forward, then we the women will. I shall call upon my fellow women. We will fight until the last of us falls in the battlefields." That moment changed everything. She became the commander of the Ashanti army, not in name, but in action. She organized resistance, planned attacks, and led a revolt against one of the most powerful empires on earth. The British expected an easy victory. What they got was a queen who turned the forest into her fortress. For months, her forces held them back, refusing to give up the golden stool. In the end, Yaa Asantewaa was captured and exiled. But her rebellion, the War of the Golden Stool, became a symbol of African resistance against colonial rule. She didn't live to see independence, but every Ghanaian who walks free today walks in her footsteps. Yaa Asantewaa proved that courage doesn't always come with a crown. Sometimes, it comes with a mother's rage and a warrior's heart. Long before Cleopatra or Catherine the Great, there was Tomyris, a queen of the Massagetè, a nomadic people of Central Asia. She ruled warriors who lived by the bow, the horse, and their freedom. And when the world's greatest conqueror came for her lands, she met him with fire in her eyes. That conqueror was Cyrus the Great of Persia, the man who built an empire stretching from the Aegean to India. He sent a proposal: "Marry me, and our empires will unite." But Tomyris saw through the trick. She refused. So Cyrus did what men of power often did: he invaded. At first, he captured her son through deceit. Grief turned to fury. Tomyris gathered her army, mounted her horse, and swore revenge. According to the historian Herodotus, she sent Cyrus a message before the final battle. "You are insatiable of blood. Well, drink your fill." And when the dust settled, Cyrus the Great, the undefeated emperor, lay dead. Legend says Tomyris found his body, filled a wineskin with blood, and dipped his head into it, a warning to every empire that thought a woman's rage was weakness. Her people called her a hero. Later historians called her a myth. But myths don't last this long unless there's truth buried inside them. Tomyris stood for a simple truth, that empires rise and fall, but freedom has a name, and sometimes, it's a woman's. History likes to pretend these women were exceptions, but they weren't. They were part of a long, unbroken line of power, courage, and defiance that the world tried to bury under centuries of silence. But erasure doesn't mean disappearance. Their names are still spoken. Their stories still breathe. And every time we tell them, the dust of history shifts just a little more in their favor. From Hatshepsut's chiseled temples to Nzinga's battlefields, from Wu Zetian's forbidden throne to Yaa Asantewaa's final stand, they left fingerprints on the shape of civilization itself. They were queens, warriors, rebels, and builders. But most of all, they were proof that power isn't given. It's taken, and remembered. So if history forgot them, let's make sure we don't. Because empires fall, but their stories still rise.